everybody, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Angela, and today I would like to talk about Solarpunk. This is a collection, an anthology of 9 short stories from Brazilian authors, and it has the subtitle Ecological and Fantastical Stories in a Sustainable World. And that explains also a bit what Solarpunk is. It's kind of like a subgenre of ecofiction, climate fiction, that imagines worlds where, a lot of our problems have been addressed and where sustainability has been already implemented. Now, this edition started its life in Brazil, where it was published by Editora Draco. That's a publishing house that seems to specialize in fantasy and science fiction. And then it was picked up by World Viva Press, who do this English edition. World Viva Press is a very small, independent US publishing house, and they did a Kickstarter to finance this translation. And there's nothing wrong with that. Using Kickstarters to fund projects is a by now almost common way of getting your funding together. And so far, and unfortunately also not so good, because there are a couple of problems with the volume, not so much, but more with the translation. And I would like to start with that so that we can actually end on a bit of a more positive note. So, one of the things that I would have liked to see, and where I think this is a little bit a missed opportunity by World Viva Press, would have been if we would have gotten something like a longer introduction. The volume comes with a preface, but it's super short. I think it's 3 pages or something like that. And as a reader that is not very familiar with Brazil or Brazilian literature, like myself, I haven't a clue about that particular area. I really would have liked some information about that. This goes also for the 9 authors, the 8 men and 1 woman that are in this volume. We get a bit of author info at the end of each story, but it's clearly just lifted from the Brazilian edition. And the problem with that is I have no real idea who those authors are. Are they a well-known name in Brazilian fantasy and science fiction literature? Are they trailblazers for certain genres like Solarpunk? I don't know, and the edition here unfortunately isn't telling me that either. My second problem is with the translation. Now, the translator of this volume is Fabio Fernandes, and I actually looked him up because I have the feeling that he's a little bit shortchanged here. He's a well-respected Brazilian translator who translates primarily, this seems to be his specialty almost, so he translates fantasy literature from English into Brazilian Portuguese. And he seems to do an excellent job because he has some really high-profile text under his belt. So he's not a nobody when it comes to translations. Now, for this edition, Solarpunk, he is translating into a foreign language. That's a bit unusual. Normally, translators translate into their native language. I do feel for Fabio Fernandes, because I've been in this position myself. I have translated into my own language, but I also have translated into English. And yes, it's a bummer. Now, I was lucky. I had people beside me who knew the culture, who knew English, who knew the culture I was translating into, and gave me lots of advice and weeded out some things that weren't working in English. This seems not to have been the case with this edition here. I get what Fabio Fernandes is trying to do when he says, I want to give a bit of the flavor of the original stories, the colloquialisms that those stories might be using. Unfortunately, they do not always work in English. So sometimes you get really weird constructions where you're like, what's that supposed to mean? Sometimes the sentence structure isn't really working out. So that's one of the problems. What weighs a bit heavier for me is grammar. We have a problem with prepositions and with pronouns in this volume, unfortunately. And it's not just the odd mistake here and there, but it's a very high frequency throughout all stories. Again, in some instances, you will just read over it because it doesn't make much difference for a sense of a sentence, but you have sentences where the sense get distorted. For example, he talks about somebody who is part of the police force, and he calls it, well, first of all, he says service. I would have gone with force, but okay, this is one of those decisions where we can say, yeah, okay, fine. But it's different if you say somebody is in the service or if you say somebody is at the service. The second one has a completely different meaning. And yeah, we have quite a number of those, false prepositions, so to say. The other thing is pronouns, especially dative pronouns. There was one story in particular where at some stage I thought, hold on, I thought this protagonist was female. What's going on? Maybe gender fluid protagonist? Yay, but no. We start sentences with he does such and such and such a thing, and then instead of continuing with him, we continue with it, we continue with she. It's all over the place. And again, it's not just one or two sentences. It's, I would say probably on average, maybe 5 of those mistakes per story. And for me, that was a little bit much. And I really don't understand why that is the case, because overall, this is a nicely produced volume, no? I mean, it comes with lovely cover art. It has a nice format. It lays well in the hand. Wobbly cover, kind of like easy to open and to read. Nice typeface as well. It even comes with some in-book art, which was done by Jose Baetas. So you get each story prefaced with a little illustration. So Worldweaver Press clearly knows how to do a nicely produced volume. So why none of the people that they have on their staff that call themselves editors took it upon themselves to go through this and do some more copy editing, I don't know, because those grammar mistakes I'm talking about, they could have been weeded out by a bit more, proofreading, basically. Huh? So it's really a shame. It's a shame because ultimately this is a volume that wants to introduce people to literature from a different culture, that wants to showcase authors from Brazil. And I don't know, it lets those authors down. It lets this poor translator down, no? Because a lot of the stuff, he might, as I say, he's at a disadvantage. He might not know he's at a disadvantage because he's not translating into his native language. And make no mistake, any translation does not just translate into a different language. It also translates into a different culture. So, I don't know what was going on there. The stories themselves are actually surprisingly good at times. There is a huge range of stories. If you're a tech nerd, you're catered for, and if you want more human interest stories, you're equally catered for. So also the stories do not just look at sustainability from the angle of energy and having sustainable energy sources, but they also look at other areas. For example, especially actually food. There are several stories that imagine humans, basically generating their own food by either using implants or using photosynthesis. But there are also areas like capitalism that is looked at, or colonialism. There are several stories that are like alternative history stories and look at a Brazil that hasn't been colonized. For me, the stories work best when they bring together those themes and topics with our human strengths and weaknesses. There are stories who look at what happens when we are getting too greedy, or that look at our vanity. There are one particular story, which might even be almost my favorite, where the story looks at the fears of a parent, and it's a really nice little intimate kind, like almost, yeah, case study of what happens when all those new technology that's around impacts our children. So yeah, I think it's a volume that has a little bit for everybody. Some stories explore very dark themes like cannibalism or human sacrifice. So yeah, overall, I enjoyed quite a few of those stories from kind of like, let's say, a narrative point of view, from the themes that they're looking at. So would I actually recommend this volume? On one level, yes, I would, because I think there are some authors in here that definitely deserve more readers, and I want them to have more readers. So if you decide to pick this up, I would suggest don't go for the paper version, because this is quite pricey. I think it says, yeah, almost $15 US. I paid something like, I think, almost 18 euro. Excuse me, that's a lot of money for something that's a very slim volume, actually, no? So if you do not mind reading an electronic text, I would say go for the e-text, because that's only a fraction of the money. But also, yeah, you as a reader will have to put in some work. And I don't mean kind of like all those grammar mistakes I was talking about. I would admit I might be a bit overcritical, because I was, of course, reading this with kind of like having in mind that I will be talking about this in a form of a review video. But anybody else might actually not mind so much and say, mistakes? What mistakes? I don't care. No? So keep that in mind as well. But also, yeah, you might have to do a bit of work when it comes to the background to those stories. And if you want to know more about Brazil and Brazilian literature, then yeah, you have to find this out yourself and ask your good friend Google. I think I will still look up some of the authors mentioned here. There's ones that I really liked, and where I thought, well, this is a cool story. I want to read more of this author. So I might actually look up some of them and try to find out, is there more available of those authors that's translated into English? So you might actually get a follow-up on this video if that's a successful mission. Okay, thank you for today. Thank you for watching. Happy reading, and I'll see you in the next video.